Welcome to Remember Me by Intervivos, the show about living life to its fullest, leaving a legacy, and deciding how you will be remembered. And now, your humble team of expert planners taking the legal world by storm.
Hello, everybody. This is Mike Black. I'm here in studio right now, and Glenn will be joining us in a minute.
You're kind of a one-man team today,
right now,
Mike.
I am, yes. That's kind of an interesting way to look at it. But, you know, the studio, the traffic was really bad today, so we're just going to be waiting for Glenn to show up. But anyway, as we were driving in, Glenn called me and he asked me, you know, when you think of child stars and child actors, who do you think of? And I gave him a list. I said Johnny Whitaker, Jodie Foster, the people, you know, the kids from the Brady Bunch. And I've had the opportunity to meet some of them from the Brady Bunch. But, you know, thinking of child stars and actors like that, Glenn was saying, I have no idea who those people are. Well, Jodie Foster probably, because she's now an adult actor and done very well for herself. However, when he thinks of child actors, he was thinking of people like Britney Spears. He mentioned a few of them others, and I don't even know who they are.
That's the generation gap at work right there.
That is the generation gap. But I do know people like Miley Cyrus and Britney Spears and those people like that. And, you know, as we were talking about this, we were thinking child actors, you'd think that every one of them, because of where they are, what happens, they'd grow up to be fully functional adults. But that doesn't happen with everybody. In fact, I was reading also, we were going to talk about some of the things, some of the challenges, and when Glenn gets here, he'll be able to talk about this a little bit more. But he's talking about some of the challenges they have. And there's a Coogan Act that was enacted because years ago, and I didn't even know this kid was, I knew him as Uncle Festus on The Addams Family. I didn't know he was the child actor. I didn't know he acted with Charlie Chaplin. In fact, Charlie Chaplin found him. People have heard the name Charlie Chaplin. People that are older than me, younger than me, probably don't know Charlie Chaplin. But he was a big silent film star. And all sorts of problems come up with child actors. You think they grow up and be happy because of the money they make and things like that. But sometimes the people that are in charge of their money really don't have their best interests in heart. They, you know, like the children. Like their parents. Their parents can sometimes think they've got the kids' best interests at heart, but they actually don't. And some of these things happen. Then the money gets squandered. And that's one of the reasons this Coogan Act got enacted. Because Jackie Coogan, he was a star in the 1930s. Like I said, he was found by Charlie Chaplin. And his parents thought that because he was under 21, they had the right to all his money. So anything that he made, and in fact, that's one of the things they said, all the money he made before he was 21, it went to the parents. So when he got old enough to figure out what was going on, he decided he wanted to make a change. So that's why the act, you know, the Coogan Act was enacted. And there's a lot of ins and outs of that. And Glenn, when he gets here, can tell us about that. Oh,
I'm here.
Hallelujah.
So, yeah, you know, child actors, a lot of times we think of them in the limelight, right? So when they're actually in the show and the roles that they played, and sometimes we don't really hear about the stories unless there's, you know, drama involved and it's on the news, right? But, you know, we wanted to explore a little bit about what role the parents play in these child actors' lives, because obviously, you know, they're making money, and when you have children that are making money, they're not 18 yet, and, you know, there's multiple laws in place, the most prevalent of which is the Uniform Transfers to Minors Act, and then, you know, the Coogan Act that applies directly to what we're talking about today. But as a child, you're not really vested with the rights of being able to own property yet, and so you have to have a custodian to manage that property for you.
And you think that the parent would be the best custodian of that, right?
Well, you would think, but we hear these stories about parents sometimes that mismanage the money, and they're sitting at home eating, but Frito-Lays and watching the movies that their kids make, right?
Yeah, living in the lap of luxury, right?
So is there a duty to these children that the public has in making sure that their assets are protected, or really is it the right that the parents should have of managing their assets for them? And should we even get involved? Should we care?
That's always a good question. Should we care?
Because I think there's a lot of, so we hear the drama, right? We hear about some of these child actors that end up committing suicide. They overdose on drugs. They they were nice kids, and all of a sudden they turn into Britney Spears or whatever the case is, that it's because their parents a lot of times drive them to that, right?
Right. And, looking at Britney Spears, she's a mother now, and she has responsibilities for her children as well, right? So hopefully she's learned from her youth and going to pass it on to her kids a little bit better.
But yeah, I think part of what we think about with these sort of situations is sometimes we think, oh well, if you're a kid that's making a lot of money, you don't have the same responsibilities that adults do. Well, guess what? You still have to pay taxes, right? There's different tax rates and so on for kids, but they still have to declare that income. You still have to worry about, how that money gets invested. You still have to worry about, and the kids aren't necessarily responsible personally for that, but somebody has to be.
Yeah. And
to the extent that, parents lose the money because they make bad investments or because they misspend it or whatever, should they be on the hook?
Well, you'd think that a custodian would be on the hook. They're responsible. They're the guardian, right? And they should have legal responsibilities to take care of that.
And normally they would, right? If they're a guardian, conservator, that sort of situation, and if it's a Uniform Transfers to Minors Act account, often they have responsibilities that are fiduciary responsibilities over those kind of accounts. The question here is, they're everyday people. A lot of times, they're not necessarily used to having that level of wealth or that level of income. Should we hold them to a higher standard, a fiduciary standard, in managing their child's funds when maybe the average person isn't that good at managing their own funds?
Well, that's a very good question, because a lot of people, even everyday people, aren't really understanding what a fiduciary is. The responsibility of taking, they're basically a steward over their finances, and and when the money gets bigger, when there's more money coming in, there should be a higher responsibility. They should actually look out for that and not squander it.
So I was sitting with a friend of mine the other day, and he shared a thought that that I just thought of, actually. But he said, if one of my kids had a talent and they made it big and they were making money, there's no way I'd stop them from doing that. I'd force them to, have to continue, if the money's rolling in, why are you going to stop acting? Why are you going to stop, making videos or whatever? Nowadays with YouTube and everything else, it's even easier.
Oh, absolutely.
For that to happen. Again, what role does the public play? Should we have any role in deciding whether kids pursue these kind of careers, sometimes against their will, or not?
That's interesting, because a lot of the pressures that are on these celebrities come from the public, because they're under scrutiny all the time, and they're either popular or not popular, and that actually determines whether they continue or not. And sometimes they have to create the drama in order to get the attention, so they're wanted again.
Yeah. And sometimes, and that's when we hear about it sometimes.
That's when we hear about it, when they're acting up and acting out.
Right. So, we focus a lot on the child actor side of this, but when we come back in just a little bit, we'll talk more about other situations when children have opportunities to make money. And, on the basic level, entrepreneurship is really picking up. On a basic level, we hear about, lemonade stands. And actually, I heard a story, it was probably a couple years ago, about a lemonade stand that made it big and was really making money, and actually was the subject of a tax audit.
And this was a kid, right?
Right.
Wow.
Yeah. And so, we'll talk a little bit about some of that. But before we break, just wanted to mention, next week we're going to be talking about planning for college. And what role parents have in setting aside money for their kids' college educations. And we'll have a guest on from the Heartland Institute of Financial Education to talk a little bit about college planning. So join us next week, and we'll see you after the break. So one last thing before we break here. Everything that we've talked about, of course, and what we're going to be talking about is not legal advice. It's merely our opinions, and you want to meet with a licensed professional to get advice for your own personal situation. But thanks for joining us on Remember Me. We'll be back in just a little bit. Hi, welcome back. This is Remember Me, the show that we talk about leaving a legacy, planning for your future, and deciding how you'll be remembered. We're talking today about child actors, and we want to get a little bit into the story here of Jackie Coogan, who was basically the actor that was behind what came to be known as the Coogan Act. And so this was a child star that was... Really, he was appalled by his parents' financial management, and he's earning this money as a child actor, and seeing his parents just blow through it, and he decides to take matters into his own hands. And we've seen other cases similar, where minors have gone to the court system and tried to enforce rights that they wouldn't otherwise have as minors. In this case, he says, it's not fair that I'm earning this money and then my parents are mismanaging it.
Well, didn't he take it to court when he was older, an adult?
Right. So, I think the idea is that this act specifically applies to minors, but in order for him to have standing and be able to take it to court, I think he was, what was it, 21?
21, I think he was, after he could realize what was going on with his finances.
So, I don't know how prevalent, this sort of issue is. I don't know how many child actors there really are out there. I know that I see them in movies.
All the time.
But I don't know, how much they earn and so on and so forth. But I have to imagine that whenever there's a child that's earning income, and if it's substantial, then, there's an interest on the parent side to want to make sure that the money is used for the benefit of the household. But to what extent is, in your opinion, Mike, do you think that when a child earns money, is that money the parent's money? Is it the child's money? Is it the family's money?
Well, to me, I think that if the child earns money, that money should be used for the child's benefit, either to help raise him if need be. If the parents are struggling, they could use it that way. But if they're struggling because of they're not working on purpose. But if they're, not working to take care of the kid, to manage his career, that's another story. But they should be given a salary so they could do that.
So let's imagine the scenario. In today's world, everybody has the opportunity to be a star, right? Because you can go on YouTube, you can go on all kinds of places nowadays that there's public forums for individuals to be recognized and to go viral, right? So let's say that somebody has a YouTube channel, and they have some followers, and they decide that they're going to record their daughter or their son doing something fun, like the baby shark video or whatever, right? And it goes viral. and now they have millions of views. And by the way, all those viewers don't really want to see the parents, even though it was their channel. They want to see the kids. So
right,
they want more videos.
They want more kid. They want to see more. There's the popularity.
So, the channel was the parents, and they're the ones, doing the editing and putting it up there and doing the social media marketing and all that sort of stuff. I mean, it could be said that they're earning the money.
Well, they are, because in that instance, I think they are earning the money because they're hiring their child as an actor, and that's part of the.
So in those sort of situations, should the children be entitled to some of the funds? And if the parents are not good with their money, should that money be protected?
Well, the kids should be paid because they are being actors on YouTube.
So let's imagine Baby Shark goes viral, and the parents pay $5 an hour for the acting, $20 an hour for the acting. Now they have millions of viewers, and that translates to some big money. So, yeah, they can pay for it, but does it have to be proportionate to the results?
You'd think it would, wouldn't you?
So I think...
Do they have to have a contract with their child?
Yeah, those are all great questions, and obviously on the legal side, as an attorney, if I were meeting with somebody and recommending things, I probably would say for tax planning purposes and so on and so forth, they want to have a contract. But is there a requirement by the law? Probably not. So, on the far extreme, some people would say, well, that's exploiting them, and you're using their, talent or their image or whatever, and sometimes again against their will, if the child decides one day, I'm sick of these videos, I don't want to do it anymore, I want to go play. Right? Yeah. But the money's coming in, the parents are going to say, well, you could play later because we got the money, we got to get the money in, right?
Yeah, and that's something hard for, you can't teach kids that sometimes because they're still children and they have that child mindset, so they want to go play. They want to do something fun. This is not fun anymore. So yeah, you're right. And how do we protect that? And the question is, do we have the obligation as the public to do that?
So, on the far end of the spectrum, there's probably people who would be very adamant and say, oh, well, that's exploitation. It's child abuse to force them to work, and you're not going to give them their money. I mean, if Shamu's not getting paid for his money and the people are complaining, then they're going to complain about this for sure, right? So, on one side of the spectrum, on the other side of the spectrum, somebody might say, well, guess what? You're under my roof. Whether you're bringing in the money or not, and guess what? It's my YouTube channel. It's my, I'm putting in the legwork to make sure that the money comes in. Who cares if you're the cute one that people are looking at, right? It's not your money, right?
Yeah.
And so on the two sides of the spectrum, I think one of the things I wanted to talk about was kind of a happy medium for those that want to proactively protect the assets of their children without having to deal with the court systems. There's something that's called a minor's trust.
Okay.
And a minor's trust can be created for a variety of reasons. Sometimes this happens because a child's in an accident. So somebody hits them with their car or whatever, and now there's money that's part of a settlement. And a lot of these settlements are lifetime, injury payouts that they're going to be crippled for life, or they're going to have an injury that's going to affect them for their whole life. So they get a big settlement check to basically take care of the injury and future damages from that injury.
And that's a long-term care kind of thing, right? Because they may not be able to take care of themselves.
Could be, yeah. So and so when the settlement happens, that money is supposed to be earmarked for the child. Obviously that money goes to them, and so somebody has to step in as a custodian for that money. And if you have a Uniform Transfers to Minors Act account, or if you have, in this case we were talking about a Coogan account, there's going to have to be a custodian over those funds, and there's reporting requirements and so on. In the alternative, if you have a minor's trust established, and a lot of times in the settlement sort of situation, the court has to approve it. But once the trust is established, there's no annual reporting requirements to the court, and you don't have to deal with all the laws of what you can invest in and what you can't invest in and all that sort of stuff. The money's earmarked for the benefit of the child. And there's it's clearly defined that it can't be used for anybody else.
Okay.
It's for their benefit, right? And similar to, if somebody has an account and they're putting away for, next week we're going to be talking about college planning and, putting money aside for college. If you have a savings account that's there for your kids and you put away money into it and you say, you know what, we're not going to touch this because it's for Johnny and for, his college fund, it's that same sort of idea.
Now, I was reading about the Coogan Act, and in that it's been updated many, many times. And I think somewhere along the lines, there was 15% of the money that was brought in had to be set aside for the children. And that was to, set them up for when they weren't acting anymore as a child actor. Right. And the rest of it was probably to the discretion of the custodian, and usually it was the parents. But that 15% had to be put aside. So there is something like that in there, in that act.
Well, and that's for that industry.
Right.
For that, but that doesn't extend to a lot of the other situations that we're talking about.
But should that extend to the children for other things as well? I mean, there's the child labor laws we have to watch.
Yeah, interesting questions. So let's take it a step further and say, so you have a YouTube channel, and the child is the one that's the star, and they have all these views, and they turn 18 and they want the YouTube channel. Who should own it? Should that be transferred to them, or can the parents keep it?
That's a good question.
The intellectual property rights,
right?
And who should own those, right?
Right.
So those are interesting questions. Another interesting question to consider, and you have a little bit of a background in the financial industry and insurance. Should a parent in the situation that the child has income be able to get a life insurance to protect that income if something happens to their child?
That's a very good question.
And, a lot of these kind of considerations are things that come up sometimes when we sit with clients to talk about, we want to make sure that we're protecting the assets that are there and that we're protecting the interests for the people involved. And one of the ways that we do that is we look at, what should be earmarked, and can we put somebody into like a fiduciary responsibility or fiduciary role as a trustee to manage those funds. So anyway, interesting discussion. Next week, we're going to be talking about college planning and the role that parents have in kind of setting aside money for their kids. If you have somebody planning on going to college in the next few years, you want to listen next week.